not believe that this company has only been on the ASX for 9 months. They are a 20-year overnight success in the making. And boy, oh boy, do we have a spicy update coming for you today. I am, of course, talking about PC Gold. And sitting here with me to deliver the good news is Executive Chair and CEO Ash Pattison. Ash, mate, how are you today?
Oh, excellent, Shay. How are you?
Excellent. Now, listen, normally in intros, I mention the commodity we're talking about, and that's gold. And I'm not normally flabbergasted by many companies when it comes to these intros, but look, what PC Gold has achieved in their very short time that they've been on the ASX is truly mind blowing. But first things we're going to start with is your recent upgraded MRE over at your Spring Hill project in Northern Territory. Mate, I don't want to steal your thunder. What are the numbers?
Oh, look, it's been quite an amazing upgrade from circa 821,000 ounces 2 years ago to, over 1.5 million ounces today. Most importantly, over 1 million ounces of that is in the indicated category, providing a very high degree of confidence around that mineralised ore body at Spring Hill. So, we've certainly seen the benefit of the 30,000 metres we've drilled since listing. Importantly, all of these results were cut off at around the 15th of April. So, we're talking about drilling released, more than 3 months ago now to incorporate into these results. So, it is an interim MRE update. We are certainly looking to do another one before the end of the calendar year. But, it's a fantastic achievement from the technical team and all parties involved to prove how robust this fantastic asset is in the Northern Territory.
It certainly is, and I'm just looking at your presentation here. We're talking about a cost price per ounce of 6,000 Australian dollars, aren't we here?
That's right. Well, you basically look at it. That's the model has been constrained within a pit shell at $6,000 an ounce. And what that shows is again, pretty much the 100% of the indicated and the majority of the inferred is mined, under that scenario, should we opt to run with that scenario. So we are talking about, a highly economic viable deposit, most importantly, and it's certainly the scale potential of the asset is really what's exciting us. We still think we're only scratching the surface of this deposit, believe it or not.
Quite literally. In fact, I notice you've talked about the fact that you haven't even gone into the underground potential here yet. Why is that?
Well, again, we've been drilling quite aggressively from surface. We continue to do some study work on reopening of the historical underground there at Spring Hill. We're just going back and forwards with the department now on the final permitting there to make that a commercial scale exploration drive. We're still very optimistic that we'll be in drilling by the end of the year from the underground perspective, and really start to chase the high grade potential in earnest. The link zone, you and I have talked about extensively since the start of the year when that was discovered. That's in this resource for the first time. Just under 200,000 ounces of 5.4 grams per tonne. So that is a discrete domain that would be targeted very early in the mining phase under the current PFS study. So, yes, it's a very large bulk tonnage system, but there's certainly some higher grade sweet spots in there for us to target from a selective underground is our current thinking.
Now, for everybody who is just joining into the Spring Hill story because of this very impressive result, take us through why you have pursued this project.
Look, the Pine Creek region of the Northern Territory was a substantial producer back in the 1990s and early 2000s. It produced over 6 million ounces of gold in the region. Unfortunately for the region, not a lot's been done in the last 30 years. Irrespective of the fact that there's more than 20 million ounces still sitting in the ground today. So it was very much an unloved gold belt of Australia. There's really only five companies that control the whole region. And you're talking some of the largest deposits in Australia in this region. Namely the Mount Todd deposit to the south of us. It's about 90 kilometres south. Is over 10.5 million ounces. You've got the Mount Bundy Rustler's Roost asset of Hang King, which is listed on the Hong Kong Exchange. That's 3 million ounces. That's 90 k's to the north of us. You have Agnico in the area, the most valuable gold company in the world today, controlling 3 million ounces in a processing plant. So, there's plenty of infrastructure. There's plenty of ounces in the ground, but it has been very unloved from a drill bit and exploration perspective. So, I know you mentioned it from the outset. This has been a long time in the making to get the asset to where it is. Bearing in mind we bought the asset with circa 200,000 ounces of resource, and today we're talking about 1.5 million ounces and still only drilled about 15% of the mineralised strike. So, it is a region of large scale assets, but certainly the jurisdiction itself, has been difficult. There's no doubt about that, but that has changed materially in the last couple of years.
Talked about how Link, so I believe you mean the Macau Link, has been included in the MRE for the first time. But you've also got a couple of other eastern zones, and I guess this is a chance for us to play show and tell with some of your previous images here. But I guess the reason why I want to talk about these few zones that have been included in the MRE is we've talked about them individually as you've drilled them, but now collectively you've brought them all together. So could you sort of run us through the importance of the Hong Kong zone first, and then we'll tap onto the others?
Yeah, look, the Hong Kong zone and Macau zones are really the bulk tonnage, base load of the mine, if you want to look at it that way. Very, very long ore systems as they sit today, 1.2 kilometres of strike. True width of those deposits, particularly Hong Kong, 50 to 60 metres wide, true width standing near vertical. So they're a miner's dream when it comes to mining that deposit through conventional open pit methods. As you've highlighted there, the Macau Link Zone is a different orientation, different dip to those two main ore bodies, and is a very high grade link structure that we only discovered earlier this year. So that's a unique domain. Then we sort of move east to what we're calling our main zone, and that's an area which had always been in our resource, but it's probably one of the areas that's seen the biggest increase in the current resource update. Again, our resource is really limited by drilling, and I think people will see that when they look at the presentation and the long sections and cross sections that are included. Everywhere we've got drill holes in this project, the resource captures mineralisation in the models. And clearly, we've got a lot of drilling still to do at depth, along strike. It is truly open in all directions. So, all of these domains we refer to them individually, as you rightly point out, for drilling purposes. But from a mining perspective, they all pretty much sit in one big pit, and that's the difference between, I guess, us and some of our peers. We are looking at a substantial pit that at the moment is about 1.2 k's long and about 600 metres wide at its widest point, and all of this mineralisation is encapsulated into that.
And you're right, that is what sets you apart from your peers, as well as you have a zone called Lasagna. Is that staying?
Yes, Lasagna. Lasagna is a zone of excitement, and it's a bit like... but certainly from an exploration perspective, and again, our exploration targets have always been outside this MRE area. So they still remain valid today. They are being reassessed also in the short term. So, Lasagna is directly along strike from the MRE. We drilled that late last year. We've got the RC rig back on that again today. We keep moving north into the northern targets of Steve's Gully, Vein Heaven. These are historical targets that haven't been drilled for 30 plus years. They were areas that were well defined and explored by Billiton in the early 90s and Ross Mining subsequent to that, two very well-known names. So we're following up. Again, we've been so distracted on the MRE area, we're still getting to work that we areas of the mine and the deposit that we knew existed, but we just haven't had the time to get there. But we're finally getting there during this dry season, most importantly.
Look, it's not distracted delivering the MRE. It's making sure the MRE gets out. Listen, you mentioned with all of the drilling that was done with the MRE that this is drilling that was done up to the 15th of April, but you and I have been talking quite a bit, and I know there's been more active drilling since then, and obviously that hasn't been factored into the MRE. Just to bring everybody up to speed from, mid-April to mid-now, what is some of the activity that's been happening in Spring Hill? And the follow-up question to that is, what does that mean for the rest of the year? Like, how does that fit into the activities over the rest of the year?
Sure. Yeah, no, look, we certainly haven't stopped. We didn't draw a line in the sand and shut rigs down for this process. We've still had 3 diamond rigs actively working since the 15th of April, and they are still working inside this MRE area. So we're still drilling extensional targets. We're still doing infill drilling. So, obviously there's a lot of news flow that will continue to come from that program. That's a 20,000 metre program, basically from the 15th of April through the end of this year. So, our update was based on 30,000 plus metres. We're still drilling another 20,000 plus metres for the rest of 26 in relation to this MRE area. In addition to that, we referred back to the exploration targets just before. That RC program's 20,000 metres of drilling that'll basically, we're already now just under 3,000 metres into that, so we're making a pretty good headway since the rig turned up on site now 4 weeks ago. So look, there's combined that's 40,000 metres of drilling to be done, and the lion's share of that is at the moment being expected to be incorporated into the updated resource again, by the end of the year. So that's a very active program with 4 rigs working. In conjunction, we are still now pushing full steam ahead with the feasibility study on developing this asset. We've been doing a lot of work in the background, metallurgical work updated, geotechnical work, environmental studies. We've installed water production bores, monitoring bores. So we're getting the mine site ready. We've purchased the camp in Pine Creek where we'll be housing our workers long term. Now we've got the resource model. We can put the final mine plan around, based on these numbers to really validate, the economic profile of this asset, even though we continue to drill and expand the asset base.
Ash, look, this is an awesome amount of work, but this awesome amount of work also costs an awful amount of money. How's the balance sheet looking right now?
Well, most importantly, we ended the financial year 30 June with 22 million in the bank. We are spending at a rate of around 2.5 million per month, with a couple of things like the settlement of the camp in Pine Creek occurred last week. So a couple of sort of chunkier amounts coming through there. So we're in a good position as of today. I expect with the PFS information flowing through into the market, people will really start to put a good valuation on us, and we will always be open to financing sources, whether that be the equity or debt markets as they seem appropriate at the time.
All right, so you are cashed up for your current plans. Good to see. Let's talk about the jurisdiction. Exactly what you said before caught my attention. An unloved gold belt in Australia. But you hinted that there's possibly another 20 million ounces there to be discovered. What is it about this region that's been forgotten?
Look, it's actually been a case where it's probably been more landlocked as opposed to forgotten. One of the things with the Northern Territory legislation is you can, with a mining licence, believe it or not, there's actually no expenditure obligation, so people can land bank, and that's certainly been the case with this region. As I mentioned earlier, it's really controlled. This whole region's controlled by really 5 or 6 substantial companies, and with a lot of sort of smaller prospectors and the like around the area. So, but there has been change. There's been, royalty changes in the Northern Territory in the last 3 years, which was a big impediment to major investment, is the belief. The Northern Territory government certainly streamlined a lot of its environmental approval processes to make that far more streamlined for explorers in particular, and then into production. and like any change of regulations, it takes time to actually start to see the fruits of those efforts, and we're starting to see that in the last sort of 4 or 5 weeks now. We've had Arafura push the button on obviously their project in the Northern Territory, a $1.2 odd billion commitment. We've had Hang King, as I mentioned, commit to their Mount Bundy project. That's a $500 million investment to the north of us in the Pine Creek region. You've had Core Lithium, in conjunction with Bill Beaumont's Develop, commit to that underground at their Finniss operation. Again, that's on the western side of the Pine Creek, Oregon. It's a $140 odd million commitment. So, you've had 3 mines now green lighted, I guess you could say, in the last 4 to 5 weeks. Put that into context, there's only 7 producing mines in the Northern Territory today, of scale. So, you've had another 3 mines. Hopefully, will be the 11th mine coming on in the not too distant future. So, there has been challenges in the past in the territory for sure, but it's well and truly open for business. It's got a government that's very pro mining, very pro resources generally. Big commitments to oil and gas, big commitments to seeing the mining industry prosper. I mean, geologically, it's a fantastic jurisdiction. That's been known for a long time, but really from a producing perspective, it's now coming into its own, I guess, which is highly encouraging for us and our peers in the state.
It certainly is. Now, Ash, I made a joke at the start of today's interview that this is a 20-year overnight success in the making. I don't know if I quite got the timeline right. But the reason why I wanted to emphasize that point is you had the foresight to, acquire some of this ground a long, long time ago, even in spite of the fact that, the Northern Territory wasn't really a pro mining state. Why is that? What made you why were you so attracted to this area that you've been willing to work on it so hard and at considerable personal expense for so long?
Yeah, look, it was over 11 years ago now that we actually bought the asset. $3.5 million cash we paid for the asset back then. Yes, gold price was only circa 1,400 Aussie an ounce back then, versus just under $6,000 today. But the key things with the asset were that it was on a granted mining license that predated native title legislation. It was in very close proximity to the Union Reef processing plant, which is owned by Agnico today. That was in full operation back at that time. It had a pretty solid resource of 200,000 ounces back then. So the aspiration as a private company was very much to basically mine those 200,000 ounces, toll mill it through Union Reef, and be happy in the private space producing plenty of gold. But as always with this deposit, every time we put a drill hole into it, it continued to grow and grow rapidly. We hit economic mineralisation in over 90% of our holes. Over 40% of our holes have visible gold in them. So every time, the drill bit has been extremely successful to us, and yes, hence the reason we still have 4 of them working today, because this interim MRE it provides a lot of excitement to the technical team in particular, because it just proves that with drilling and with investment, we are finally seeing the true scale. So yeah, it's great to have hindsight of what we did 10 years ago, but the plan was a little bit different.
It certainly is. And if the mine continues to keep on giving, you must keep on exploring. Listen, Ash, we have almost run out of time for today, but I can't leave today's interview without sort of a sneak preview of coming events. Obviously, there is a hive of activity happening. What are going to be some of those, near-term success markers investors can look for?
Yeah, look, obviously, first one's just those continued release of results, both within the resource area and the exploration targets, more importantly. So that'll start to validate that exploration target that we have today, 1 to 2 million ounces on top of this resource. So that's a very important catalyst during the course of the next, in the lead up to Christmas, which, scary enough, is not that far away. More importantly, for those that love to look at the numbers and the detail around financials and economics, the pre-feasibility study we're working on now will validate, our belief that we will construct our own standalone processing plant here to be fed by that combination of open pit underground ore. And there's a lot of work that's been done in the background that's to come out even before that's released. So updated metallurgical test work, geotechnics is all done. So there is a stream of news flow that will, one, not only validate the size potential of this asset, but most importantly, the economics around this asset, by Christmas. So I'm looking forward to Christmas this year.
So will some others. Listen, Ash, this is great to watch the Spring Hill project just grow and increase in size, as well as your dedication to it. I'm very looking forward to what the next updated MRE has in store with the amount of drilling going on. Thank you so much for your time today. I know this is a longer than usual update, but I really appreciate it. And the latest news really does deserve a bit more of a drill deeper. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Shay, and always a pleasure to catch up.